hadn't done a pitch call out in about a year, I guess, so I hadn't really been paying attention to what that world was like. But this time I got like way more pitches than ever, very quickly, from all over the place. It was very different than the year before.
Nicholas Hune-Brown is the editor of The Local, which is an independent online magazine that covers social issues in Toronto. And last September, they put out an open call for freelance journalists to pitch stories for their upcoming issue.
We were looking to assign stories about healthcare and money. There's been some creeping privatization in Ontario where we live. So we put out a call for pitches. I posted something on Blue Sky just asking freelancers, give me your suggestions.
Nick got a lot of pitches, but among those, there was one in particular that stood out.
This was a writer who called herself Victoria Goldie. She said in the email that she'd written for a bunch of these Canadian publications that do similar work to what we do. It was a well-written pitch, I thought. And when I did a quick Google of her, she had bylines in a bunch of, reputable publications, The Guardian, New York Magazine, places like that. When you see someone has written for all these other publications, my first instinct was like, that seems legit. These other publications are good publications. I'm not going to be too suspicious.
Why would you be?
Yeah.
But Victoria Goldie turned out not to be who she said she was. And this sent Nick down a really weird rabbit hole investigation. You've heard of fake news? Well, welcome to a new scam. Fake journalists. This is Kill Switch. I'm Dexter Thomas. Back in September, when Nick first put out this call for pitches, the magazine was deliberately trying to expand their freelance writer pool. They were hoping to find new writers, new voices, people with interesting stories to tell.
Part of our mandate is we want to work with young writers. We want to work with people from different parts of the city, different backgrounds. We are actively seeking to work with people who maybe don't have the clips, are not as experienced, but are able to bring a point of view and a story to us that we won't find elsewhere. So the pitch meant a whole lot. If you could tell me an awesome story in a pitch, if I could see your style in the pitch, if I could see that you had an idea I couldn't find elsewhere, that would go a long way.
And Victoria Goldie's pitch hit all those things. It was exactly what Nick was looking for. Her pitch was about a debate in Canada about something called membership medicine. So you probably know that Canada has free essential healthcare, but membership medicine is basically when patients pay their doctors directly for more premium services. And man, Victoria was on it. In that initial email to Nick, she wrote, quote, "The story would track how these plans transform healthcare into something resembling Netflix or Amazon Prime, and what this means for a public system that has long prided itself on universality."
The pitch she sent, it indicated that she'd done a lot of reporting already. She'd done some research. She said she'd spoken with a couple prominent doctors here. She seemed to have some patients who were willing to talk about their experiences with privatized medical care. It seemed like a promising pitch. So we thought, let's take a shot on this person.
And look, just as a fellow freelancer, I appreciate Nick taking that shot on Victoria, because I've been there. You're trying to show an editor that you're the person to hire, so you do all this extra work up front. Look, I've already done this interview. I've already got access to the hospital. Just say the word, boss, and I will write the best article just for you. Please pick me. So please understand, right now at this point, I am rooting for Victoria Goldie. So in the next meeting, Nick and his editorial team decide to move forward with Victoria. So this is where he would sit down and then reply to her email to let her know. But then he looked at Victoria's original email again and realized something that he hadn't noticed before.
I went back to her pitch and some other questions popped up in my mind. The biggest one was, is she in Toronto? Because she'd done work in, when I looked at her Guardian stuff, it was all about her being in England. When she'd done stuff for American magazines, it seemed as if she was writing as an American. So I wondered, there are people who are international. There's no reason that you couldn't be publishing and reporting from different places. But, it was a question I had. And the second was that she'd done so much pre-reporting for this. She'd done so much work on this pitch within a week or two of me sending out the call out. She'd interviewed, 4 people or something were in that first pitch. And I was a freelancer forever. I know that process. And sometimes it's useful to do some reporting before you get a story assigned. But that much is a lot. It's a risk, right? There's no guarantee that you're going to land the story. So then I thought, there's times where someone can be a student journalist and then they're reusing interviews they've done before. There's different reasons that could happen. But that made me question some things.
So he dug a little deeper.
So then I wanted to just see what stories she'd done for Canadian publications. I'd seen the work that she'd done at The Guardian, the work she'd done elsewhere. And in her pitch, she said she'd written for our national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, the Walrus, kind of magazines that are like us. So I just Googled her name along with those publications, and nothing came up.
This is where Nick starts to get really suspicious. Could Victoria just be lying about publishing in all these different places? And if she was, what else could she be lying about? He went back to look at her pitch to see if there was any other explanation for this.
Well, then I was looking at all these quotes that she had in her pitch, and some of them were from regular patients, she said, and some were from some prominent doctors in Toronto. And my colleague happens to know one of these doctors, so he shot her an email and said, did you speak to a journalist called Victoria Goldie? And this doctor, Dr. Danielle Martin, said, no, never heard of her. That's very weird that I'm being quoted this way.
Wow.
So when that happened, I kind of knew what was going on, right? Like, I looked at the pitch again, I read it with kind of different eyes, and it felt to me as if someone had been using generative AI to create a pitch with made-up quotes from real people, and they had been making up some of their bylines in Canadian publications. And when you reread it again, it was like there was some ChatGPT-isms, you know? If there was some, like, formulaic writing about this pitch is important because of X. It's timely because of Y. It's perfect for your publication because of Z. It felt a little, when I looked at it more closely, you could see some things that felt a little inhuman, I guess.
See, that's tough because I've definitely pitched things and I've used language like that.
No, totally.
Like, that's what you do. Like, you tell, hey, I'd like to write this, and it's timely because this is happening. It's the anniversary of whatever, and we should revisit this.
Yeah. No, all the tells for ChatGPT or whatever, like, people say, look out for M dashes, and I'm so resentful of that. I use M dashes all the time. Like, it's
same.
So I don't know. I don't have a good way of spotting something that, but the made up quotes and the kind of made up bylines made me think this is what was happening.
So, okay, you're starting to think that this is AI. What do you do next?
Then I just got really curious, right? Like, it's clear that this was a fake pitch, but like, what about all of those other bylines, like all those other stories? There's dozens of them across the internet that she's written. Like, if she was faking stuff in this pitch for us so blatantly, what about those stories?
After Nick puts together that Victoria seems to have not only ChatGPT'd her pitch, but also lied about working on other Canadian publications, he decides that he needs to figure out how far this rabbit hole goes. He's pretty sure he's being lied to, but he's still curious. So you didn't confront her immediately?
No, I wanted to know a little more. I did send some follow-up emails. I said, like, did you actually speak with these people? And she said, yes, I did. I said, are you based in Toronto because we need local reporting? She said, yeah, absolutely, I'm based in Toronto. So the kind of, like, I understood the level of deception that was going on, I guess. I understood that she was making stuff up. So when I started looking into the work that she'd published, the first one I looked at was this feature from the Journal of the Law Society of Scotland, which was like an in-depth feature that was about law firms disappearing from the Scottish Highlands and like what were rural people doing. And it quoted like members of parliament, it quoted a bunch of lawyers, academics, and then a bunch of regular people. So I was just wondering, like, is this a real article? I couldn't find any of the regular people, you know, when she begins an anecdote like Fiona, 42, a school teacher in Glengarry or whatever. Like, those people, Googled them, couldn't find any of them. So then I emailed the people that she spoke to who were real, like a professor called Elaine Sutherland, professor of law, who she quoted in that piece. And I just emailed and said, did you speak to this writer? And she said, no, absolutely not. But what's weird is that this sounds like the kind of thing I would say. And this was the response that I was getting in a lot of places. And I don't know, it's one of the eerier things, right? It's not someone just making stuff up, but it is, I believe, AI searching through the internet, thinking, who is the likely person who can talk about Scottish law firms disappearing from the Highlands? You find someone who maybe has spoken about that in the past or written a research paper about it or whatever it is, and then kind of invents quotes that sound kind of like in the ballpark of what you might say. So that was the first piece that I thought, okay, this is a made-up story. And then I just kept looking. There were more. There was a story in Dwell that quoted like 10 prominent international designers and architects, and I just started sending emails to all of them, and they had not spoken to this person.
Victoria had published work in The Guardian, in Business Insider, New York Magazine, Rolling Stone Africa, Vogue Philippines. I could keep going here. This is a resume that almost any freelance journalist would be really jealous of. How many articles did she have out there?
I think over 24. I think I've got a spreadsheet of over 24 articles.
You made a spreadsheet.
I got obsessed. I don't know. I was not going to write about this. We're a local publication that only writes about Toronto, right? I was just doing this out of curiosity to begin with. I don't know. It just seems so wild to me that this stuff was out there, and I don't know. Maybe I sound like overly, people are lying on the internet. I found it shocking, I guess.
How dare somebody lie on the internet?
Yeah. But I lie on the internet under the Guardian's name or whatever. I don't know.
That is different.
Yeah.
That is different. Yeah. Getting on there and saying, hey, yo, I don't know, somebody like lying on their dating profile. Yo, I'm 6'2", and like, bro, you're 5'3". Like,
yeah.
Okay, maybe not a nice thing to do, but also very different from fooling the public into thinking that something happened and some people said some things that they actually never did. So one place that had published Victoria's work had actually already taken some stuff down, but they didn't say it was because of AI.
I emailed with editors of other publications and spoke to a former editor at Pop Sugar, which had taken down a number of articles that she'd written. So I went online and it said that it was taken down because there were inconsistencies or it didn't live up to Pop Sugar standards. The editor said that there were plagiarism issues with the stories. And she also said that, oh, it's interesting. You're the third editor to have emailed me about this freelancer in the last month. She must be on a pitch tour. And it was true. She was pitching everywhere.
Yeah. So walk me through this. Like, what were you feeling at this time?
Oh, I felt embarrassed to begin with. I think the pitch call was, I said something about like the ways that health and money collide in 2025 in Ontario, something like that. And it felt to me like the pitches were some large language model taking that little prompt and sending me back like what I wanted to hear. And of course I was like, oh yeah, I'm into this. This makes sense. This is all about how health and money collide in 2025. Like I was embarrassed at being kind of like sent back my own prompt in a way that felt like it was just designed to appeal to me. And I got fooled, right? As I moved through it though, like, I don't know, I began to feel, maybe this sounds overblown, but like a sense of despair. Like at a certain point, I'm tracking down all this stuff. She's telling lies all over the place. I go back to my inbox, which still has a million pitches, and I'm going through it, and I'm seeing the ones that look so synthetic, so AI. And I start idly Googling some of those authors, and I see that they have places across the internet as well. And I'm not going to do a deep dive on every single freelancer that ends up in my inbox, but like, how much of the stuff is out there? Like how much of, I don't know, that was depressing to me. I spent my whole life writing journalism, and this feeling of this just being the tip of a pretty like awful iceberg was dispiriting, I guess.
After investigating all of this past work, Nick needed some answers. He finally decided that he was ready to confront Victoria.
I wanted to talk to her. I had like so many questions about who this person really is. Like as I'm in this world, I'm reading their writing, right? And some of it's first person stuff, and it's all obviously all a mix of true and false or completely false. I'm trying to figure out where they are. It feels like from some of their earlier writing and some of their social media that they may be based in Nigeria, or at least are from Nigeria. I just had a ton of questions for this person, so I wanted to get them on the phone. So I did. I emailed and said, let's chat about this piece.
Nick emails Victoria asking if he can talk more about her article. From a freelancer's standpoint, an initial check-in call is a pretty normal next step toward officially being accepted and being paid. So Victoria agreed to a video call, and they set it up for later that week.
In the kind of 10 minutes before that was about to start, they emailed and said, I think I have internet connections, let's do this over audio. And then I got them over the phone. And it was a strange conversation. It was a kind of surreal experience.
Yeah, what happened?
So I guess in the fantasy version of this conversation that I had been trying to plan out was I would present them with some inconsistencies, and they'd get bigger and bigger, and at a certain point they would just have to admit these lies, and then maybe we could actually talk about who they were and what were they a real journalist who had gotten in over their heads? Were they a scammer who had just like found some easy marks with like overworked editors? That was the unrealistic dream version of this conversation. How it actually happened was I got on the phone. Someone very chipper who sounded to my ear like a young woman with an African accent was on the phone. I asked where she was based in Toronto, and she cheerfully said Bloor, which is like if you said, whereabouts do you live in New York? And they just said Broadway. So,
Right. Okay.
But this person had Googled a street in Toronto, so I was already, well done. And then I kind of just walked them through some of the inconsistencies, and I didn't want to spook them necessarily. I didn't want them to hang up right away. So I asked them if they'd spoken to the doctor in her pitch. She said yes, she had. I mentioned that, we actually spoke to that doctor, and she says she didn't speak to you. And she said, oh yes, of course. My personal assistant actually spoke with her. I didn't press on the fact that like freelance journalists don't have personal assistants. I kind of let that drift past. I asked why I couldn't find the stories in the Walrus and the Globe and Mail, and she said most of those were done online only. I emailed the editors from the Globe and the Walrus, and they said they've never worked with her. I asked if she just recently moved to Toronto, because it seemed like she was writing first-person stories from London and other places, and she said, yeah, she just moved this year. I asked her why the stories were gone from Pop Sugar, and she said, oh, the editor moved on from Pop Sugar, so they took down all the articles that they worked on with me, which is not how that works. I was just kind of letting these things go past. But every question she just sort of answered very cheerfully, very upbeat, didn't seem to be shaken by it. She had quick, ready responses to implausible, but quick and ready. It's almost impressive. And then I kind of moved on to the bigger inconsistencies, right? I started talking about that story in the Scottish Journal. I said that she'd quoted this professor, Elaine Sutherland. I said I'd actually spoken to Elaine Sutherland, and she said she's never spoken to you. And I realized in the pause afterwards that she was gone, that she'd hung up. She's not responded to an email since. I've not heard from her since.
And it looks like that last question did it for Victoria. She knew the jig was up. After that phone call, Victoria quietly removed herself from the internet. In
the days that followed, I emailed her again. I, tried to get in touch with her. The X account that had been posting some stuff under her name disappeared. Her muckrack page, which is kind of a list of all the journalists' stories, that went private. Her personal website went down. She kind of disappeared after that phone call. And I say she. I at this point I do not know who like Victoria Goldie is. The evidence suggests that this person is either from or still lives in Nigeria. I don't think it's a whole farm of people working together and sending out stuff under one byline, although it could be. That's something that crossed my mind a lot. For a while I thought maybe there's no singular person attached to this name at all. Maybe it's just, one of a dozen bylines that people are using to get paid for some writing. I don't think that's the case. One of the earliest stories I found under that byline, it was a couple months before ChatGPT came out, which is kind of the demarcating line, I think, after which, like, you can't trust that a sentence was written by a human. And it was like, it felt different. Those early stories there's some grammatical mistakes, they're clumsier, they're less smooth, less slick, but they seem to represent like a real person talking about real things.
One article from that pre-ChatGPT era is from May of 2022. It's a piece that Victoria Goldie wrote for a website called Black Ballad with the title, How I'm Learning to Navigate Toxic Positivity on Social Media. And there's this line where she writes, quote, "There's this immense pressure to be productive. Most people like me are tired and trying to survive day to day."
So I think this is a real individual. This is not their name necessarily, but I think this is one individual, and you see a kind of continuity of interests throughout. They're into K-dramas, they're into Afrobeats. There's some continuity of what feels like a person there. I can't know for sure, but I think this is an individual who, at least in those early stories, is writing about going online like the rest of us and it making her miserable, seeing people who are presenting themselves as doing so well, seeing all this hustle culture, and they're just struggling to get by day to day.
So in the beginning, she was writing about going online, seeing hustle culture, getting kind of depressed. And that's what the hustle culture bros are selling you right now is, hey, here's how to make a bunch of money by cranking out content with AI.
Exactly.
So kind of can't beat them, join them type thing.
Yeah. So in the end, I don't know who this person is. I have some sympathy for them.
After all of this, Nick decided to make his investigation public, and he published a piece in The Local, and that's actually where I first read about it. The title of his piece was called Investigating a Possible Scammer in Journalism's AI Era.
We published the piece. It got a crazy response. But I think the most telling response I got was so many emails from editors from around the world, which was kind of mind-blowing. Victoria Goldie had been pitching everywhere from Nature to an Oakland startup that began a few weeks ago doing book reviews. Someone on the West Coast who was running this tiny Indigenous-run publication said that they had just assigned a story to her, and they just did a quick Google to her, and they're like, thank you so much. We were very close to signing the contract. Someone else from this publication called Republic, they phoned me up. They were in the middle of a second draft with her. They were editing a story about people living in their vans in the American Southwest that was based on Victoria's own experience living in a van in the American Southwest.
Oh my gosh.
The Financial Times, around the world, this person was really incredibly prolific.
Just the sheer volume of pitches that Victoria Goldie was sending out might give us a hint at her motivations. Journalism is famously not a very lucrative career, especially for a freelance journalist. Ask me how I know. And maybe, pre-AI, Victoria was having trouble finding work. But if you can start writing for dozens of places at once, that might start to add up.
I guess part of what's interesting to me is I think we were offering $2,000 for this story. That's our rate. Dwell paid, I think she got $1,500 for that or something. In that Dwell article, if you actually had interviewed 10 of the top designers in the world, that $1,500 doesn't go far. But if you enter it into ChatGPT and get this thing out 5 minutes later, that's a pretty good return, right?
And for a long time, she got away with it. Victoria Goldie had dozens of articles across the internet for a bunch of really well-respected publications. By the end of Nick's investigation, 4 of her old articles had come down. As of this recording, there are still a few out there, which I'll talk about later. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask Nick what we could do about all this. How do we change editorial processes? I mean, how is the local change their editorial process? Are there different hoops that somebody has to jump through to submit an article? I
mean, yeah, it got a big response on the internet, but it got a big response in our newsroom. We've been thinking about how do we do what we do going forward in this era? Like I said at the beginning, we want to work with new writers, right? This is our whole thing. I owe my career to a pitch used to be this key that could open a door, even if you didn't know anybody at a publication. If you could write an amazing pitch, that's a way into places. A pitch now is not connected, or it's not necessarily connected to any human being, right? So when we're trying to find new writers, what do? It's made our jobs difficult. We're talking about, I'm going to do more coffees with young freelancers. I'm going to phone their editors, but this is all a bummer. This all takes so much time. It takes so much money. Everyone's already overworked. And I think the fear is that you're just going to work with people you already know. You're just going to work with established people. You're never going to take a chance on someone new because did they write their pitch? Did they write their previous story even?
You can't trust anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am doing more phone calls earlier in the process with writers. At least you get a sense of a person. You know that you're talking to a real person. We've beefed up our fact-checking process. So people send annotated drafts. We're checking through them. I think if you had robust fact-checking, this story is not getting into Dwell magazine, right? The depressing thing about this scammer, as opposed to classic scammers like Jason Blair or Stephen Glass, right? People making up stuff in the past. They were doing that in a world where journalism has a certain amount of power and prestige, and they're doing it for that reason. This is people who are taking advantage of an ecosystem that is already pretty broken and
and
overworked. Yeah, there's not fact checkers. I don't think an editor at some of these places could have thought twice about some of this stuff even. So yeah, to combat it, it would take more money. It would take more resources. It would take journalists spending more time doing that work. And we're already at a point where we're going in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you said robust fact checking, any journalists listening to this are probably laughing and or spit out their coffee or crying into their coffee probably because that's one of the things that gets cut.
Yeah.
That's do organizations have fact checkers? Yes, but maybe they used to have 5 and now they have 1. Or the editor maybe is being asked to handle all that work. And so we got to spend money to clean it up.
Yeah.
and I mean, it's interesting because this isn't really necessarily about AI. You know, I hate to echo the AI boosters here, right? But this is something that's often said. AI is a tool, and this is somebody who, and maybe multiple somebodies, who are using just a tool that is more efficient.
Exactly. The scale would be impossible with AI. The efficiency. I would not have heard from dozens of editors around the world who'd been pitched stories that fit pretty well into their niche. Like we're way off. That's only possible with the technology, right? But yeah, this is human beings using that technology to do something that I don't know they've done for a while.
But there is something new that comes with these AI models that have scraped everything ever written. It's changing people's definitions of truth and lies in ways that journalists haven't had to think about before. And I'm not just saying, oh, truth is important, lies are bad. I just mean that it's getting weird.
So one of the responses I got from one of these experts who I followed up on, who had quotes made up by Victoria Goldie for one of these stories, they said, "That's not me. I don't remember speaking to this writer, but that sounds like something I would say, and I'm okay with that material being out there." And that, like, wow, that took me aback. Like that indicates that we are part of a world where, like, I think we already know that a lot of people don't mind the slop. Like, the slop is everywhere because people are fine with it if it's backs up some of their preconceived ideas, or it seems close enough, right? And the fact that individuals themselves are okay with being represented, it's close enough to what they said or what they believe. That makes me think like we are we're entering a whole new paradigm about what truth even is, and that is like, I don't know.
All right, counterpoint. What if it doesn't matter that we've got AI journalists? Look, you wanted an article on the kind of creeping privatization of the healthcare system. You have a general idea of what some of these people are going to say. And for a lay reader who isn't really familiar with everything, they need to be brought up to speed on the basics, right? So what's the harm in having, some chatbot fill in the blanks for them and say some things that are pretty plausible from a few experts? The AI models, it's trained on everything they've said. It knows about what they're going to say.
Yeah. I mean, this is the argument that kind of terrifies me, right? Like, to be clear,
I'm not advocating for this.
I know. I hear you taking the AI point of view. First of all, they don't know what individuals say, right? Everyone is surprising, and AI can only say what's been said already. Like, it's incapable of actually advancing a story. And the news is about saying what is new, right? And that is something that I think cannot be replaced at all.
Right.
And but more fundamentally, like, I don't know, we just can't be cool with having stuff that is not true presented as true because it's close enough, or it's like we're losing that grip on, when someone's quoted, they have to have said a thing. When like, I feel like I'm losing my mind as we're kind of moving away from actually recognizing that, like, when you say stuff's true, it's got to be true. Otherwise, what are we even? How can we talk? How can we argue? How can we agree on anything?
Yeah, I think we were in the post-truth thing already. It's like post-truth.
Yeah, I think like university professors have been here for a while already. Like, it's been a few years of them dealing with this world. But for me personally, in like my little corner of magazine journalism, I haven't been confronted with it until now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you bring that up, because I think a lot of people they're curious about how university professors or high school professors or whatever are dealing with the fact that, a lot of their students are probably just typing a prompt into ChatGPT and then, cranking out a 1,000-word essay. But that's a very controlled environment. It's a fishbowl. Mm-hmm. If somebody at the university down the road, ChatGPT generates their history exam, that doesn't affect me personally. But if somebody is ChatGPT generating an article about what the LAPD is doing or not doing, that could affect me. We're already at a stage where people just straight up don't trust journalism at all, and we're in this weird stage where it's like, well, you guys need to do better. You're all lying.
Yeah.
And okay, what do we do if the writers are lying to the editors? The writers don't even exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no answers. It's just it's weighing on me. Yeah.
as of right now, as I'm recording this, not all of Victoria Goldie's work is gone. So among that work are 3 articles that she wrote for Business Insider. 2 of those were published just before ChatGPT dropped in November of 2022, and one came out right after. I dug into all of these articles. Each one is an interview with one person who, as far as I can tell, seems to actually exist. The articles are kind of boring, but they seem legit. But there's also this really interesting article that she wrote for The Guardian, and this one only came out in September of 2025. So Victoria Goldie writes about hanging out in East London and going to raves and soccer games, mixing with different people, learning about different cultures. And near the end of this really personal essay, she writes, quote, "The future of our music is not written by algorithm." That article has been taken down. So was that one real? Is any of this real? How many of us even care? All right, I don't want to lose sight of how all this started. Nick has finally put his investigation to rest, and the local special on healthcare in Canada is now out, and it's ready for you to read it. And if you're wondering if they're going to put something about Victoria Goldie in there,
I don't think so. We're moving on. We're moving on.
moving on. Thank you once again for checking out another episode of the video version of the Kill Switch podcast. And yes, Kill Switch is a podcast, which means if you prefer to do these things in audio, you can find Kill Switch wherever you get your podcasts. The audio version has a whole different mix, different music, and you can find a link to that in the description. And also, by the way, if you're not already subscribed, you know what to do, because you probably don't want to miss the next week's episode of Kill Switch. And speaking of which, catch y'all next week.